Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 49 for May 19th, 2017. Hey everyone, Daniel Rubino here, executive editor of Windows Central, joined by Zach Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central Podcast, where we focus on all things Microsoft, and we're catching up on the last 2 weeks, including Microsoft's Build conference. So we're going to try to keep this to 60 minutes, but who knows? We may go to 65. Anyway, this week's schedule, we're going to cover Redstone 3. It gets its official name. We're going to talk about the Fluent Design language, which is a really neat thing that I happen to be excited about. iTunes is coming to the store. Microsoft's mobile strategy, if there is one. We're going to talk about the new build for insiders and what it means, including the new features that are available. And we're going to talk about a new leak that came out regarding the Control Center, which is going to get a revamp pretty soon. Zach, how are you doing on this fine day?
I'm not too bad. How are you?
I'm hanging in there, barely by a thread. It's been a very crazy last few weeks. If you're sitting at home just reading the internet, it's probably not been too crazy. Hopefully your lives are okay. For us, though, we've been traveling a lot. Lots of meetings, lots of good news, lots of devices coming out, and exciting stuff, including on May 23rd, Microsoft is holding their own event in Shanghai, China. I was going to go, but then some plans changed, so now I'm not going. But Mark Wim is going there, so we'll be there live, but that's okay because it's going to be a very exciting day. So make sure you tune in on Tuesday, early a.m. I believe it's about 8:30 a.m. We'll have the latest news from Microsoft at that time. You'll definitely want to tune in. If you're expecting a Surface phone, you don't have to tune in. So there will be no phone news. So I can definitely tell you that.
We should probably just say now, if you're expecting a Surface phone at any event where we haven't said a Surface phone is expected, it's not going to show up.
Sure, yeah.
It's like, that's very far-fetched if you're hoping for a Surface phone at any event this year or possibly even next year.
Definitely. So that's kind of sad, but that's okay. We got lots of exciting news. Let's talk about Redstone 3. So we're heading back to Build a week and a half ago. Now, to clarify again, people I think still never understand really what Build is, but Build is a developer conference.
Yes.
Although there are some consumer-facing features that are announced, and if you're a real Windows nerd, and if you're listening to this podcast, that's probably you, there are a lot of things to get excited over, but there are also not going to be a lot of, say, consumer hardware products announced, not necessarily, strategies and long-term plannings, but they do talk about visions. And the biggest thing, of course, they do for developers is announce new tools that allow them to do their jobs better, as well as things like bridges and, this kind of stuff. So it gets a little tedious, a little boring, but Microsoft they try to do a good job of keeping us entertained. They actually swapped things around this year. So on the first day, it was a little bit more, I would say, less consumer facing, where Azure got brought on, which, Azure is super important to Microsoft's business. But if you're just a person who likes using Microsoft Windows 10, probably got a little bored during that. But that's okay, because the next day on Thursday was a lot more exciting. Let's talk about Redstone 3, which is not Redstone 3 anymore. It is what, Zach?
It's called the Fall Creators Update, which, might I add, is a ridiculous name that nobody's a fan of. Well, maybe not. Maybe some people are. But yes, Full Creators Update. So Redstone 3 carries on the theme of creating that was introduced with Redstone 2, the Creators Update. So Full Creators Update, as its name implies, it will be coming later this year in the fall, scheduled for around September or October. Although a few weeks ago, Microsoft announced that they were finally committing to a more predictable release schedule with, a release in April, May, and September, October. They were unable to commit to September, October to us at a press briefing at Build, which is very interesting. So who knows whether Redstone 3, the Full Creators Update, will be ready.
But that is their goal, right? September, October is their goal. They would like to hit that. They didn't commit because, things change.
I just think it's funny how they came out recently and said, "Oh yeah, we're so going to be hitting these months as release times. We're so on this schedule now." And then a few weeks later, they were like, maybe. It depends on how we feel. It's obviously not like that. It's more like whether they can finish it in time or not, which hopefully they will. I'm still expecting Redstone 3, the Full Creators Update, to be done by the end of September, which would slot it in nicely for an October release. But yeah, Full Creators Update, it will include a bunch of new things. It will include a little bit more of Project Neon, which is now known as the Fluent Design language. We'll talk about that in a minute. Cloud Clipboard, which is basically one clip being built into Windows 10. This is something I wrote about a long time ago now, finally showing up. There's also a new timeline feature, which it basically allows you to go back in time and restore sessions and open apps and stuff.
Fix your life mistakes, or just what apps you were running.
So
explain this feature to me, because I was there, I was at the briefing, I was at the build keynote. I'm still not 100% sure. I feel like this is one of those features that could be really awesome, but you won't really know it until you try it. It seems a little, I don't know, explain it to me and why it's kind of cool.
So Timeline allows the user to jump back in time to find what they were working on. It works with a visual feature through the task view. So if you click the task view button, you get, right now at least, you get just an option that allows you to add virtual desktops and see all your open windows. This Timeline feature will be in there, where it will give you a list of all of the open windows you have currently, plus all of the open windows you had on previous days. So you can scroll down on May 10th, May 9th, April 29th, and see all of the apps and stuff you had open on that day. Then you can click on that app and it will restore that app to its session where it was on that day. So for example, you could be working on a PowerPoint presentation today, then obviously save that presentation, close it, whatever else. But then a few days later, I want to go back to that presentation. Instead of opening PowerPoint and looking for the document you saved, you could just open Timeline and go, oh yeah, there's the document I was working on. Click it. It will launch PowerPoint with that document exactly where you left it off. I think that's pretty cool, although I didn't know anybody was asking for this feature. Most people just went through, I saved this document, let me find it in File Explorer. But now there's a whole new UI for just jumping straight to it. It's pretty nice. Microsoft also, I guess they're adding this into the enhancements that they're doing to pick up where I left off, which should get a little bit more useful with the full Creators Update. It will be coming to iOS and Android, which is pretty interesting. We'll talk more about that with the mobile strategy stuff later in the show. But yeah, Timeline's actually pretty cool. I'm not sure how it should be coming in Resident 3, I believe, but it's not in the Insider Preview builds yet.
Right. Now, someone's asking about, is Task View gone? So does this replace Task View, or how's that going to work?
That's a good question. As far as I'm aware, no. Virtual desktops and Task View will still be there, because it obviously...
so that makes more sense, right? Because Task View is about switching your currently open apps. It's about the presence.
I assume that will work since it's a timeline feature, I'm sure there will be a now area where it's like, this is you right now, where you can use Task View normally. And I'm sure there will be a virtual desktops option, although I wouldn't be surprised if they get rid of the virtual desktop stuff, because as far as I'm aware, nobody uses it. I know I don't use it.
I think developers use it, and I do know people who do use it, but I mean, not personally, but online I see a lot of people reference it and talk about it. So I think it's all these features, I don't know. Like, first of all, I'm not that excited about Timeline. Maybe I have to try it, and then I can get into it, but I don't think it's really necessarily built for me either. But this does start to... Between that, the clipboard stuff, the pick up where you left off, you're starting to see this push of Microsoft services through the cloud and basically allowing you to do your work across devices, which if you go back to their old motto, which we could even talk about how they changed that to, mobile first, cloud first, right? Now it's Windows Cloud Edge something. I don't know. I'm not really a huge fan of the new motto, but you can start to see where this goal about moving the OS sort of into the background. So you still need the OS, of course, but it's about what you do and being able to continue and do that task from any other device. And I think that's where all these pieces now are starting to, get lit up, and that vision is starting to come together. Whereas like a year ago, it was just kind of like, okay, there's Windows 10, there's a Windows 10 mobile, something with Xbox, but there's really no, and UWPs kind of link things, but there was no real like actual functionality that linked all those systems together.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely. I mean, it looks like with the full Creators Update, they're definitely trying to link devices, whether they be running Windows or not, to your PC. So I think Microsoft said to us in a press briefing, they might have even said it online, on stage even, that they expect, they want to make, if you have 6 devices, on average a person has 6 devices, whether they be Android, iPhones, Windows, whatever. If one of those 6 devices is running Windows, Microsoft can make your entire experience with all those devices better, which is an interesting strategy if you think about it. So Microsoft is saying, right, you may have 5 other devices that have nothing to do with Microsoft or Windows, but if one of those devices do run Windows, then all of those devices will talk to each other better and communicate better and link together better, which is a great way of sort of forcing people into your ecosystem. Because now,
Sure.
if you're an Android user, you're probably using Google stuff here and there. But now, imagine being able to just say, oh, yeah, I can now just, if I use Microsoft services on my Android, I can have a seamless experience between both platforms and devices. That makes a lot more sense for people, whether they be diehard Google or just a normal consumer who doesn't care. It's going to be a very interesting strategy for Microsoft, which I think might work.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, because if you say you're all wrapped on Google services and you use an Android phone, ultimately, though, that you're very likely to own or use a PC. Now, of course, you could also own a Mac, but this is one area Google still has a weakness in. It's like, okay, after the phone and after Google search, what's the tie-in, right? Like they don't have, and this is where Chromebooks, right? They're trying to get Chromebooks in, but Chromebooks are like this like weakened laptop thing that's trying to become more powerful, but it's not a PC replacement yet. And, for all its flaws, the PC is still sort of the dominant computing platform, at least for like, quote unquote, real work. And so Microsoft still can leverage that to basically create this interesting ecosystem. Now, Apple has done a lot of this stuff before. Even the timeline stuff feels very Apple-ish to me. But the difference there, of course, being that Apple locks their stuff to their operating system and their ecosystem, and it can never leave. Like FaceTime is actually like some really neat stuff. And you can argue like the reason why FaceTime works so well is because it's locked to their system. They don't need to worry about compatibility. On the other hand, it also severely limits adoption of those kind of services. Like you basically have to be all in on Apple stuff in order to really appreciate what they've created. But if you release a laptop that doesn't meet your expectations, now you're kind of in a weird situation. Now you got to have a bifurcated OS experience. Right. You got to have your iPhone and a Windows device, and that's tough for some people.
I mean, with Apple's system, they've got continuity, which is basically pick up where I left off on Windows. Yeah. Except continuity only works between a Mac and an iPhone. If you use an Android and a Mac, you are out of luck. They do not talk to each other at all. And developers, I believe, can also tap into the timeline feature and pick up where I left off. So if Google really wanted to, they could build, a Google Apps or Gmail app or whatever for Windows 10 that could talk with Timeline. And then, for example, you could have the app open on your phone, which also shows up in Timeline on your desktop, and you can click into that and it will launch that same app on your desktop. That would be one way Google can sort of tie into things here and there. Whether Google wants to do that or not is another story altogether. But this is a thing that developers can take advantage of as well. So it will be very interesting to see who does and who doesn't, because I know Google and Microsoft aren't really friends. Hopefully that changes down the line. I know Microsoft and Apple appear to be making amends with iTunes coming to the store, which is pretty interesting. But before we talk about that, let's talk about the new Fluent design. So Project Neon, this is a thing we exclusively revealed back in December last year. A new design language for Windows 10 that would start showing up in more noticeable ways with Redstone 3. And to this last week at Build, Microsoft did in fact unveil Project Neon officially as the Fluent Design System. Interesting name. I like the Fluent Design part. System doesn't really make sense, but oh well.
Right.
It's a whole thing pretty much. So this is Microsoft's new Metro. If you remember Metro, that was the sort of Windows Phone 7, Windows 8 design language, the square tiles, very flat design. And that was kind of carried through to Windows 10, although they sort of changed it up a bit and called it the Microsoft Design Language 2. So Metro was MDL1, Microsoft Design Language 1. Then there was the Windows 10 stuff through Threshold 1, True, and Redstone 1, which was Microsoft Design Language 2. And now Fluent Design could technically be referred to as Microsoft Design Language 3. It's an evolution of MDL2 and MDL1, adding lots more animations, fluidity, blur, whatever you want to call it, materials, light. They had 5 different categories. Can you remember them? I don't remember them.
There was light, motion, yeah.
There was light, motion,
material, and
I've got it. Yeah, light, depth, motion, material, and scale. So they're the 5 key factors of the Fluent design system. And the most interesting ones are material, light, and I'd say motion. The depth and scale ones are more 3D orientated. So if you're in mixed reality and HoloLens, but there's light, motion, and material.
Well, scale is also important, I would say, for this idea that you could scale down to a mobile phone, or right, like a full-on Surface Hub or HoloLens. Yeah, so that's super important. The materials is really interesting because we have the acrylic is the first material, and I say first because the way we were both in that session when they talked about this, and the way they talked about it was that this is wave one. And they have plans. And I think wave one is also in terms of specific features, but also, first party, third party. So what we've seen up to this point is a lot of first party apps have been coming done by Microsoft in-house. Now what they did at Build was, hey, all that stuff we've been doing, here's how you can do it. And it turns out you add like literally a line or two to your code and you can do this. It's super easy. Even as a non-developer, I was like, okay, these are basically binaries, on, off, yes, no kind of things for coders. So super easy for them to do it now. They gave a lot of examples of how devs can use it, but then they also talked about like what is coming in wave two, or basically ideas that they're considering. And they didn't mention a new material, but my guess is they may play around with different types of materials, because devs can now pick, like, say, acrylic. They could choose light or dark, and then even color shades and opacity levels. And so there could be, in theory, other materials that come down the line. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I really liked this whole thing because I've been talking for a long time about this, that up till now, Windows 10 felt like, okay, it has elements of the modern UI, but there was no clear like mantra behind it, right? There was no like, what was cool about Metro was had like, content before Chrome, and I had all these like specific bullet point things you were supposed to do, and what defined it. And so and people understood it. I'm talking non-designers, our own audience really understood what it meant to do Metro. And they really needed that, and they did it. They did a really good job. In fact, I think Fluent design language is way more defined and specific and logical. They told this great story, and we've been talking about it for a while. I mean, we basically said, what was known as Project Neon. Conceptually, it was this idea of taking a UI and for apps and the OS eventually too, and building it for a world where there aren't really 2D screens anymore. So things like HoloLens, mixed reality, and all that, because that's what they're moving towards. So they're taking in that philosophy and they're mixing it into the 2D world. And so they really told a story about, why it's not enough to go, hey, we have a new design language. Look, it makes everything pretty. And that's actually kind of what material design does. I don't want to really knock Google, because I think they've actually rebounded quite a lot with material design, but it's very flat. It's borrowed obviously a lot from the modern Metro kind of thing, but it's their own twist. But this actually says like, oh no, we have like a specific reason why we're doing this. There's like technological changes coming down the road where this stuff will make more sense. And that's way more interesting than going, we have a pretty new font for you to use.
I mean, Microsoft even said to us at Build that they were now moving away from the flat design language that they had been using for almost a decade now, they said, which I guess makes sense since Metro first started showing up with Zune, which was, a while ago.
Well, so it actually goes back before that. Mobile, it was the Media Device Center, MDC.
Right.
Yeah, there are elements. You can actually trace it back to like some other things. But yeah, Zune was probably the real first consumer-facing feature where this real radical thing where fonts overlapped the screen, so you couldn't read everything in a scroll and all that, and there were like no pictures; it was just black.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a change, but it's a nice change. It is very nice, and it's important to note now. Not many people got this message at Build or just watching Build, but the Fluent design announcement is more of a journey. It's them announcing that this is where they're going to be taking the design language of all of their platforms and services over time. You're not going to see everything updated to Fluent Design with Redstone 3. The Fluent Design introduction is a journey, and it started with Redstone 2, with the Creators Update. If you are a Creators Update user, which I'm sure many of you are, some of the apps you're already using are using some Fluent Design elements. The Groove Music, for example, already has some Fluent Design stuff in it. With Redstone 3, we'll see it in more areas, including more system apps, and even some of these shell areas, I believe, such as the taskbar and start menu with like the light hover effect and whatnot. But then through Redstone 4 and 5, we'll see it show up in more sort of noticeable areas in some of the concepts, because they've released some pretty crazy concepts in their sort of wow video, sizzle video that they released for Fluent Design. File Explorer concepts. There was a whole Xbox dashboard concept. There's a few
even the start menu, right? Even the start menu there's a light one, and it was very minimal. You can still see they're still focusing on this minimal, glyph type icons. I think it looks really great.
Oh yeah, definitely. But those kind of concepts, especially the light concepts, they are a little bit further away than a lot of people are expecting. Because a lot of people saw that and gone, "Wait, that's coming in Resident 3? Wow!" It probably isn't. A lot of this,
Light was really interesting with the calculator. How he showed the real subtle.
The light hover effect will be there, but I mean, like the actual light theme, which they had in some of the concepts, where the taskbar was light and the start menu was light. That's interesting. That probably won't be a thing for a little while, but so the more drastic stuff is what I'm talking about, but the more simple stuff, such as the light hover effect, which looks great, by the way. If you haven't tried the calculator app, please do. It's amazing. That should start showing up in Redstone 3, and that's pretty exciting. I can't wait to be able to like hover all over my icons on the desktop.
Which also point out that there's this idea of it being a journey. It's kind of two-part. One, actually, I would say it's three-part. One, they actually have to build this stuff out, and it takes time. So they're not going to just, put all this out on day one. Two, some of that stuff is just undefined. So they're playing with different ideas, but nothing like for Wave 2, as far as I know, there's not a lot set in stone yet. And probably even if there's a Wave 3, definitely not there either. But they're kicking ideas around, they're playing around with things, and so they still have to build them out. The third reason, of course, is just pragmatic. As cool as it would be to like update Windows 10 to, the Fall Creators Update and have this all new UI experience, they learned major lessons, obvious lessons from the Windows 8 era where they did radically change things. And wow, did that, you could have anticipated that, but it could have gone a different way too. Like, it's really hard to predict these things, but obviously the reaction to Windows 8 was no, and so they're now taking a very pragmatic approach where they're slowly introducing these features. Here's an app update. Oh, look at us. Like in Groove now, I remember when people noticed in Groove, like they were telling me when you click on an artist and you get the big artist window, and then you scroll down with your mouse, that window will shrink down and it removes some content. It still stays visible, but now it's smaller so you can see the other stuff. Like that is actually part of this Fluent design, But that was like, okay, here's this little thing sneaks in there, right? And you're going to start to see more of that happen. But the idea is like, it's hard to notice. And that makes it hard for us too, because people don't appreciate how much has changed in Windows 10 because it's so piecemeal. And especially insiders have this problem where it's like, there's nothing in this update. But as someone who has multiple computers and each running different builds and stuff like that, I remember once I recently redid a computer and it by default installed the Skype preview app, and it was like one of the first generation ones. And it's just like, wow, did that thing look horrible. And I don't think people rip on Skype. It's like, go back to the original Skype UWP when it first came out. It had lines everywhere and there was no dark theme. It was just like a mess, So we have to kind of keep this stuff in mind. But yeah, that's the reason, what's going to happen in like 2 years. You're going to wake up and your OS is going to be vastly, I don't want to say vastly different, but it'll be different than what we have today.
I mean, it'll be good to in 2 years' time just to look back at the creators update and go, wow, a lot of things have changed there on the design front, because it will have by then. And in 2 years' time, definitely before then, I believe, a lot of the design elements would have been updated to Fluent Design or whatever else. And like I said, this is their new design language, so expect this to show up on their websites and services and whatever else, because it took a while for Metro to like reach Outlook.com and the Microsoft account website and whatever else. That the updates should also eventually make it to there again as well. So it is a journey which will take,
I see some people complain about mobile. So mobile does have some of these elements in it, but Microsoft was very clear on this too. And we've talked about this before where, say, the acrylic thing doesn't make too much sense if you have like a full, because mobile, the apps run full screen. And even on Windows 10, it's not supposed to really do that. So how it's supposed to be is like if you have a windowed app, you're supposed to get the acrylic effect. But if you maximize it, that acrylic effect is supposed to go away. And on mobile, it's always full screen, so there shouldn't be. It doesn't make sense. There's nothing behind that app, in the real world. So it doesn't make sense.
You can already see this behavior if you use tablet mode on Windows 10. If you use tablet mode on Windows 10 and open an app that's entirely transparent through its background, the transparency won't be there because it doesn't need to be there.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's not like Microsoft aren't limiting Windows 10 Mobile in that regard. It's a behavioral thing that they've decided, not just for phones, but for tablets and whatever runs a full screen app. It just doesn't make sense to be able to see the background in a full screen app. But if you're using Continuum, for example, when Microsoft finally introduces windowed mode to Continuum on Windows Phone, you'll see the transparency effects because that's in a windowed environment. That's where it will be.
And that brings up the other issue. Some people are complaining about performance, and I've noticed this a little bit in my group app on even the Elite X3, where the menu seems like it takes an extra second.
Right.
Now, I'm kind of curious about that. We know a little bit about Seashell. Specifically, it uses XAML for the live tiles, and I'm wondering if some of that affects the performance of these apps and how these effects are happening, because the mobile, this is still going back to what Seashell is supposed to do. The mobile shell is still a different system, an older system than what is on Windows 10 PC. And this is one area they still need to sort of unify and get underneath the same roof, as far as I understand, or hopefully you understand. And composable shell is supposed to kind of do that, unify these the shells, but also make them flexible for different devices. And I think once that happens, you're going to start to see a lot of these sort of performance differences disappear. Microsoft was pretty clear that the acrylic thing for PC doesn't affect performance. Like it's not using, it shouldn't, but of course PCs vastly different from the experience on a mobile phone. And this may be an area where one reason why mobile, it can't kind of do the stuff that they want it to do. And there's always that weird balance between, adding features and, especially low end.
I'd also say on mobile, the Fluent Design stuff is still in its early sort of days. And there's plenty of time for Microsoft to continue optimizing it on mobile platforms or on low end devices, which I'm sure they will, because,
Windows 10 Mobile, do you remember the first Insider builds?
Yeah.
So they can definitely improve performance. Right. I mean, they've proven that. So that's a good point too. That what we see today, just it is insider stuff.
It is worth keeping in mind that on mobile, at least, the Fluent Design stuff isn't in the release preview ring or production builds yet. They are only in the fast ring, so they are still definitely testing it with insiders right now on mobile. But yeah, honestly, the Fluent Design stuff is super exciting. I cannot wait to see when Microsoft takes it. All of their products and services. I mean, in the sizzle video they released, they had also Xbox One S and they had the Surface Studio and Surface Pro, I think. So it not only is Fluent Design software related, it's also hardware related. So the Xbox One S is technically a Fluent Design, if you want to look at it like that. But yeah, it's all pretty awesome, and I'm pretty excited.
And that actually really ties into an interesting point, which is this is software kind of reflecting the realities of the hardware that's changing. But my guess is, too, that the hardware teams will start to incorporate these same elements into hardware physical features, too. That only makes sense, meaning that some of these same sort of design aesthetics that we see should also be reflected in the hardware. And that'll be kind of interesting. So,
you know what else is pretty interesting? iTunes in the Windows Store.
So now this is just for context for people. So a lot of us were briefed about what was coming for builds the day before. And that's why, it's not a surprise. But once the keynote started, we had a bunch of articles go up. That wasn't a mistake. But the one thing they did keep from us was the bombshell thing, the iTunes. So when everybody gasped, that was actually a real reaction because they didn't tell anyone about that. And I had heard from a source, and Zach and I had talked about this before, about potential announcement for the store. Basically another win, something big coming to the store. And there was really only two things we could think of. It wasn't going to be Adobe because they already kind of did it. But it was either going to be Google or Apple. And I was actually kind of thinking maybe Google and Chrome, but nope, it turns out it was Apple and iTunes, which is actually really impressive. Now, we should make clear they announced it. It's not in the store right now, and we're not expecting it into some vague end of the year kind of thing, which is a bit unfortunate. But the fact that they can do that, this gets back to I wrote an article a couple weeks ago saying how you're going to really see Microsoft push things like Project Centennial and UWP as desktop solutions. And that should start to come clear now that you know that Surface Laptop is out or about to come out. Now that Windows 10S is a thing. That's all coming into reality, as you can see. Because if you wanted a Surface Laptop and it was locked to the store, one of the top apps you may want to install for people who have iPhones is iTunes. And now in the future, you'll be able to do that. And that all makes sense. Now, that's not mobile in the sense of your phone, but that is an important way for Microsoft to boost UWP and show that the store can handle some pretty advanced applications, regardless of their origins.
It's worth noting as well that all of the big announcements for the Windows Store in regards to new apps were desktop apps. There were no big UWP announcements this build, which is very interesting, and kind of proves Dan's point in the sense that, you know, the Windows Store, Microsoft has changed its strategy. It's no longer, UWP first and foremost. It's, hey, if you have an app, just bring it to the store. It's fine. And over time, we went to the Desktop Bridge session at Build, and that was a very, very insightful session, actually. I learned quite a few things there. For example, apparently you can have hybrid desktop UWP apps, which is very interesting. So over time, a developer can add a fully Win32 desktop app to the store, but then over time, update bits of it to UWP. So you can have the app, but then eventually it will be a UWP app if the developer decides to update it over time.
Well, and more importantly, they could actually, this is super important. You can have apparently a Win32 app through Project Centennial, add UWP stuff to it, and just have the UWP stuff run on mobile, but keep the desktop part for the desktop experience. Now, I don't know of any clear examples of that. And part of the Centennial stuff, the bridge to bring classic Win32 apps into the Windows Store, is complicated by the fact that it's not like that devs just aren't doing it. There are current limitations. They mentioned, I believe, there are 450,000 known APIs for the Win32 system. Now, they also quickly pointed out a lot of those are garbage. They're used once. Some company made it specifically for their app. But their task is huge. They need to be able to at least take 1,000 maybe or 10,000 of those APIs and make them work with the UWP and bridge system. And that does take time. And that's why you don't see some apps yet in the store. It's because they may have, say, a call feature that calls up through the File Explorer and something. And that's something they're adding in. So as these features get lit up, devs will be like, oh, now my app can fully work and I can do that without any changes. So again, this is why I always talk about bridges as being a process. It's not like Centennial came out a year ago. It's done, no more work left to do. And now people are like, oh, there's like only 1,000 apps in the store that's failed. No, not at all. It's a huge thing that they're doing. So we have to keep that in mind.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that true universal Windows apps are dead. Microsoft are still very much so pushing the true UWP stuff. I'm sure if Microsoft are planning to build any new apps, they will build them as UWPs. And I'm sure any developers who are planning to build new apps will choose the UWP platform rather over Win32 because it's just a much cleaner, lighter platform. And as you say, they are slowly adding more APIs over time. And I believe they said on stage that they eventually expect UWP to be as powerful as Win32 one day, which is, again, not a surprise.
They absolutely want people on UWP. I mean, going back to the Fluent design language, all that stuff can't be in a desktop app. You can't have that in a desktop Centennial app. It's just because the desktop Centennial's app's UI is locked to whatever was built in Win32. So they're definitely, UWP for them is, a native UWP, I should say, is still the end goal here. What they're trying to do for developers is, one, as a temporary solution to both build up their store, get these apps in there as quickly and easily as possible. But the goal is, once they're there, to start converting it to a native UWP. And that goes part and parcel with this idea that UWP as a platform, as you said, it gets more powerful.
Right, and I think right now all Microsoft wants is just those apps in the store, whether they're true universal or Win32, because then once they're in there, they're in there. And developers can then see how popular or unpopular the Windows Store is, and then they can measure whether it's worth it to start transferring.
Oh, someone's pointing out, Ethan says that Microsoft Teams is an example of the hybrid Win32. That actually makes sense because
I didn't know that, actually.
Well, the Microsoft Teams app for mobile is a little strange. It feels actually like a stripped down app. So I guess compared to the full desktop, that could actually make sense then, because it feels like this obviously is using some of the same code. So that would actually make sense.
Yeah, I guess so. But very interesting. Microsoft's Windows Store strategy has changed dramatically, but I feel like for now, at least in the current time that we're in, it's changed for the better, where Microsoft are now like, oh, whatever, any app's a good app, we don't care. Just please be in the store. Because then it will encourage people to use the store. Because the problem with the store right now is that there's nothing in it, therefore nobody goes there. And then developers see that nobody goes there and don't build apps for it. It's basically a catch-22 scenario where nobody wants to do anything with it because nobody's doing anything with it anyway. So Microsoft needs to force apps in there to get users to actually consider it. Then developers see that users are using it. Then they think, oh yeah, let's build for that. That's just basically how it's going to work from now on. And honestly, it's the only strategy they have going for them because there's no other way they're going to get anything in there.
Right.
But yeah, I think the iTunes in the store surprise. I didn't realize people use iTunes anymore, if I'm honest, because iPhones can sort of be set up and used without iTunes on the computer now. I know that wasn't the case like 5 years ago or 6 years ago even. But iTunes sucks on Windows.
Yeah, it's funny though, because as bad as iTunes is, so here's the reason why iTunes is bad, right? I mean, I don't like the UI, and I actually find it pretty confusing to use myself. But part of the problem, it's sort of like Visual Studio, Microsoft's own product, and so they actually talked about this, how Visual Studio installs up to 750,000 registry entries. And if you've ever installed Visual Studio, you'll know this because one, it takes forever and there's a lot of stuff going on in the background. And uninstalling it is sort of a small nightmare. It's almost not worth it to uninstall. And that's kind of the same problem with iTunes. It's a very it installs and it just gets very deep into your OS and it's running all these background tasks and it's super kind of annoying. iTunes as a siloed UWP Centennial app actually solves a lot of that, right? It's not touching your registry. Everything is in a manifest. It's completely separate. It won't affect performance. They can do updates just through the store system instead of running it in the background. This is the one case, and could be a success story where they make iTunes better. We maybe ought to go, iTunes ain't that bad now. And I think that's honestly going to be the case. Because I use Adobe Elements, and Elements is, Adobe switched to this all software system a few years ago. You have to go and download it, and, it's kind of complicated. It's an executable. Once it came to the store, though, I install this now on all my laptops. It's just like installing an app. It's beautiful. In fact, you actually get more licenses, which is
I do think some of the apps will still touch the registry if they need to. But you are right. This does solve a lot of those problems. It does make it a lot more cleaner and more tolerable, if you will. I know, for Slack, for example, I know Slack's pretty clean anyway if you use the installer. But for the Windows Store, you don't have to use an installer. They were talking about at the Desktop Bridge session. If you put your app in the store, you don't even have to compile an installer. You can just throw it in the store, and Microsoft would do the installing things for you. So, which is why if you install an app from the store, it's one click. You don't have to deal with any additional installers to choose the location, where the program gets installed, and whatever else. Just that one button in the store does everything for you. And
would you like to create a desktop shortcut?
Yeah, exactly. The Windows Store just sorts it out. It goes right. This program goes into the Windows Apps area. It has all of its listings there, all of its app associations, whatever else, file associations. We put this listing in the apps list on the start menu. Then the user can do whatever else they want with it. They can pin it to start, desktop, taskbar, whatever they want to do with it. But just one button gets it to where it needs to be. Then the user can choose otherwise once it's installed. It is a much cleaner experience, in my opinion, and makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this stuff. And it also sets the way, right? People always talk about why would a company put their app in the store? Especially Apple, right? Their biggest competitor. But at the same time, Apple makes Windows apps. iTunes is a Windows app, right? Mm-hmm. They make Safari still.
Do they?
Yeah.
I don't think they do for Windows anymore.
Oh, maybe they finally ended it because why bother?
Sucks.
But they did. My point is, it's they're not above making Windows apps. So you're just literally talking about the way to distribute these things. That's what it's going to come down to. Now, there's an interesting argument that a lot of people bring up, which is developers can, just sell their app direct versus Microsoft taking a cut in the store because they take about 30%. And, there's some truth to that. At the same time, there is a better customer experience. In theory, a developer could sell more licenses by greater exposure. That's the long-term plan. But it is upon Microsoft to prove to developers, hey, this is a better system for you. It's a better system for your customers. And everybody benefits from this, so you need to do it. But I'm not saying they've completely done that, but it is up to them to actually demonstrate that.
Also, I'm almost willing to bet my McLaren that Apple bringing iTunes to the Windows Store is the result of some kind of deal with Microsoft. I do not believe
Windows 10 Mobile.
I do not believe for 1 second that Apple woke up one morning and gone, you know what we should do today? We should put iTunes in the Windows Store. No way did that happen. Microsoft approached Apple and said, hey, look, please put iTunes in the store. We won't take any cuts from anything anything bought through the store, because I know on the iOS App Store at least, right. if an app has in-app purchases, Apple can take a cut of that as well, and I think that was an issue with that. through
Yeah,
Apple's
that was a
through
bookstore
Microsoft.
thing.
Yeah, through Microsoft's Office stuff. If you owned the Office app and you wanted to buy an Office sub through the Office app on iOS, Apple were like, "Are you buying something through the app? We can take money from that." And Microsoft
that's
were like,
crazy.
"Yeah." And I assume that's the same on Windows Store.
I don't know, and that's a really good question.
If it's not, that's a surprise. But if it is, I'm pretty sure Microsoft said to Apple, "Yeah, we won't take a cut from anything. You can have."
It's
everything."
also, I mean, this actually does benefit Apple, right? I mean, the fact is the thing as Windows 10 and Windows 10s and a store-only model comes more prevalent, like, Apple's going to want to have their tools for their customers. That's just what it comes down to. Like, if your customers end up switching to Windows and are using it, like, you want them to have the ability to, sync their phones, which are still super important to people. So this actually does benefit Apple to have that sort of, we'll be where our customers are kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think the iTunes coming to the store is less for the iPhone users and more for the Apple Music users who are using Apple Music to listen to music on their computers. And a lot of iPhone users are also Windows users. So it does make sense to go there. But yeah.
Will there become a day where we see Chrome in the store, Google Chrome?
Isn't there like limitations?
There's a prohibition saying that any browsers basically need to be based off of the Edge engine.
And Google would never do that to Chrome.
And it's a weird situation if you think about it. I mean, if Microsoft allows Chrome in the store, it would be really good for end users. 51% of the U.S. browsing market is Chrome. There's just no denying that. The double edge, so you would get people using the store. And I think this is where Windows 10s, specifically on a Surface laptop, is going to become interesting because it's an experiment, right? They're going to put it out there. The question is, how many people are unlocking to get the Pro? Now, everybody's listening to this podcast. You're probably going to unlock the Pro. Not a problem. But the question is for like regular people, like what's the number going to be? Is it like 20% don't go to Pro and stay on S? Is it 40%? Is it 80%? That number could vary greatly. And I honestly couldn't put a number on it right now. I have no guesses there. But so let's say a lot of people do switch to Pro. The next question, the logical question is why? What was the one app or the two apps that you needed and that you couldn't live without, that you had to upgrade to Pro? And that's where Microsoft needs to work on. Now, some of this stuff is really self-evident. I think iTunes was there, Spotify would be there, Adobe stuff would be there, and I would say browsers, right? Google Chrome would be there. And so if they see a lot of people going, I had to unlock Pro because I just need Google Chrome, like that's a huge weak spot, and Microsoft needs to fix that. Now, the alternate solution there is you just make Edge so good that people don't want to switch to Chrome or, don't mind using it. And that's a tough sell because a lot of people get, real fix into their browsing habits, or they need extensions. I hear this one a lot. Chrome has this extension that I use that's not an Edge. And these are real problems that Microsoft needs to solve.
For a lot of users, normal users at least, it's not about what's better. It's about what they're familiar with. I know loads of people who refuse to jump ship from Firefox because that's what they use. They've used it for a long time. They don't see
Habits
Chrome.
are hard to break. Yep.
Exactly. And even though we all know Firefox sucks and Google Chrome is better than Firefox in every single way, shape, and form, they still want to use Firefox. So it's some people are like that. So if Microsoft can make Edge the best browser to have ever graced this planet, that doesn't mean people will change from Chrome.
And Microsoft could bend the rules. They could be like, that's the rules, but we made a deal with Google here because it's bigger than this. I
fully expect Microsoft would be welcoming Chrome with open arms, whether they use the Edge engine or not, because they have no choice. They simply have no choice. If Google said, right, fine, we'll bring Chrome to the store, but we haven't touched the code, it's Chrome as it is, using our own technologies. If Microsoft said no to that, they are crazy. They are absolutely insane. There's no way they would say no to that.
Yeah, I would love to know the discussions on that, what's happening. But like I said, that's why when people, and I wrote an article this week talking about Windows 10s, again, being, if you're a pro user and you're a real geek, and if you're following all this stuff, if you know what x86 is versus ARM, like if you know that, obviously pro, is the way you want to go. But, this idea of solving Windows 10s and so that people don't unlock it and just stay in the store. Like I've talked about how I do live in that system. I'm fine with it. But the reason, of course, is because that critical threshold. It's just like the reason why people switch from Windows 10 Mobile. They're like, I liked it. It was fine, but I need this this one app or these two apps or these three apps. Like I need this banking app, I need this social thing. It's not here. I have to switch. And the same thing goes in reverse for this store. If like they can, there's literally probably about 10 at max old Win32 apps that are out there that people just use and rely on every day. And if they could just get those 10 into the store, you would probably get about 90% of the average consumer just would be totally fine with that experience. It's not a huge number. They don't need to get 400 apps. They don't need to get that weird app that was last updated in 2006 that you have to download from some weird Chinese site. They just need those big ones. And that's the funny thing about Win32 apps. It's like in these classic ones, they really haven't changed. Like there's no new ones. They're just old ones that have been updated. That's all it is now. There's like, I can't name you a single Win32 app that's new that it's like, oh yeah, you got to have this. You got to install it on your PC. It's such a weird thing.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely. I mean, normal consumers will use one or two Win32 programs these days. I mean, honestly, the web browser is really the only Win32 program a normal consumer uses. Think about it. Yeah. What else are they using that's Win32? Nothing.
Well, iTunes, I would say right. iTunes, Spotify, and like some services.
But even then, like a lot Adobe. Of people, for Spotify at least, will just use the website because it's through a browser. Because a lot of people, most of the stuff normal consumers do are through a web browser, as we've said time and time again. So the app issue on Windows 10 desktops at least isn't as big of an issue as many people are making out to be. And I say many people, it's just the 1%ers who are making it out to be as big issue. And Chrome, of course, once that's in the store, if it ever comes to the store, that will probably solve most of everybody's issues with it. Yeah. And then everything else is a bonus. And like I said, once developers start seeing usage in the store, they will see a benefit of being in the store, and they will add their apps and whatever else, and it's a snowball effect. It gets bigger and starts rolling, and more people jump on. So I'm pretty excited for the Windows Store and iTunes. Not really iTunes, but the Windows Store I'm very excited for. Moving on to our next story, Microsoft's mobile strategy. So this is an interesting...
Did we find one while we were on campus?
Yeah, we saw a Surface Phone. No, we didn't.
It was like a janitor's closet that was crossed out and said mobile strategizing.
Wow, okay. Yeah, so at Build, Microsoft talked about mobile, but they didn't talk about Windows 10 Mobile as many people were hoping for. They talked about mobile in the general sense, iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. There was a Windows Phone demo on stage, which was nice. But Microsoft's mobile strategy is very much catering to all of their users, no matter what platform they're on. So if you are a Windows Phone user, that's good news for you. But if you're an Android and iOS user, you're also getting some benefits here. So for example, with Redstone 3 and the full Creators Update, Microsoft will be adding pick up where I left off functionality to iOS and Android through the timeline feature, as we talked about, and through some other apps such as OneDrive. OneDrive placeholders are on their way back to desktop, but they will also sync and work through iOS and Android as well, and Windows Phone. So the OneDrive app, for example, you can pop into it and you can see your PC where your desktop is, and then you can see all the files there that are on your desktop or in your documents folder through your phone. Another example is with the Story Remix app, another new feature coming with the full Creators Update. That app, I believe, must be coming to iOS and Android as well, since they did a demo with it on iOS.
Have you played with that app, by the way? Yeah, that was we missed that with the Build stuff, the Remix app.
I played it for like 2 seconds. I don't really have many videos to mess with it, but yeah.
But you don't need video. You saw the thing I posted in the
group,
right?
I haven't really touched it much.
It's kind of corny, but it's actually really kind of neat too.
Yeah, it's a very consumery feature. But yeah. So for example, they showed that they had here's all of our stuff here. We can do these edits, and then they also used the iPhone to do similar things. So as this comes back to the whole Microsoft wants to make your devices better with Windows 10, whether it be iOS, Android, whatever else. And that's their strategy now. Their strategy is we will work on whatever mobile platform you're working. We don't care at this point. If Windows Phone didn't do very well, and we understand that most of you don't want to switch from iOS and Android, so we will come to you. That's basically what they've said. And honestly, it's a strategy that makes sense. Right now, at least. Microsoft can't win with the Windows Phone right now, no matter how much they try. Releasing a Surface Phone tomorrow wouldn't change the fact that Windows Phone still has 1% market share. It wouldn't. And so for now, Microsoft needs to cater to where their users are, and their users are using Android and iOS. That's the hard truth. And so to make their experience better, this is what they're doing with Redstone 3. And honestly, I think it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, there does come a point where I think Microsoft was just super realistic and just said, all right, this is not going to do anything. We can, a lot of us, including myself, argue like, just keep it alive. We're talking about the OnePlus 3T, like Microsoft, just talk to them, just have them slap a Windows 10 mobile ROM on there and, sell it online, right? Kind of thing. It's at very low risk. But at the same time, they seem to be, Microsoft is very aggressive. They either create products that are going to be hits, and if they're not hits, they kill them off. And when Microsoft Band's a good example of that. But when they kill these things off, it's not like, oh, well, wearables we're done with. Well, that was a stupid thing, and we learned nothing from it. They're very good at going. I guarantee you right now, especially with Band, right? They took that and they're like, okay, here are the top 5 reasons why this thing did not succeed in the market, right? There was, of course, there was the reliability issues. So there are a lot of people who they would get tears and all this kind of thing. So there's manufacturing things they have to figure out. There's a whole wearable, so they go through all these, listings, and that's where they start new. Going back to Band, it's just that it doesn't run Windows 10, right? Or it runs this weird firmware. Didn't fit at all. If you look at all the vision of Microsoft, it doesn't fit. So they have to figure out something there. But what I'm saying is when they cancel products, I know it upsets people, even Kinect, right? So they cancel kind of Kinect. It's not there anymore, really. But Kinect technology is what powers HoloLens. It's what powers those mixed reality headsets you guys are seeing coming out to the market now. So it's not like they take these things and they just put it into a heap and they don't learn anything from it. Quite the opposite. You just see that technology basically get refabricated into a different product. Sometimes a new product. So, and I know they're still working on wearables, but they're going to do it until they get it right. And you got to kind of respect having that sort of a high standard for your products. Unfortunately, mobile just wasn't there. I've heard mixed things. I heard things that once Nokia got bought by Microsoft too, a lot of people at Nokia were very unhappy for what I think are obvious reasons. You're a small, independent company based in Finland. You have a lot of heritage, and this giant monolith company buys you in the U.S., and now a lot of you have to move there. I've heard that there was some sabotaging going on with some of those designs, and I almost don't blame them. It's like, yeah, screw you guys. It's a tough thing.
Yeah, no, and as you say, Microsoft did a demo on stage at Build, and they used a Windows Phone, which in my mind is enough of a sort of hidden message of them saying, yeah, we're not killing this. If they were going to kill it, they wouldn't have shown it on stage. They wouldn't have mentioned it at all. Joe Belfiore wouldn't have brought it up. And also there was like a slide where they said, oh yeah, Windows loves all of these phones, and Windows Phone was included. So
yeah, and then if people still tweeted at me, yeah, but it was last,
right? I mean,
because that matters,
right? But they did have it on stage, which in my mind is enough of a sort of nod.
And we did see it at some demonstrations.
Yeah, it's enough of a nod of them saying, yeah, this is still a thing that we understand and acknowledge, and no, we're not killing it off, and that kind of follows their sort of public statement of we are committed to mobile. Now, I know I've said this many times. I believe when they say mobile, they mean iOS, Android as well, which is annoying. But Windows 10 Mobile specifically, it doesn't look like they're planning to kill it. I mean, there's also the whole thing that, but they could do a Windows Phone 7.8 scenario, which is entirely possible, and I'm not ruling that out. Windows 10 Mobile, as it is today, may be on a Windows Phone 7.8 path, where they next year or the year after introduce a new Windows 10 Mobile or Windows 11 Mobile, whatever you want to call it, that is running on new devices only and doesn't come to existing devices like the 950 and Helix 3 or whatever. That's fine, but that's still Windows Phone. And Microsoft are, I believe, still committed to Windows Phone. And them demoing Windows Phones on stage at Build this year sort of proved that to me. Even though it was like a 10-second demo showing just an app thing, I don't really care. It was there, and I think that's enough.
All I know is after seeing what the Surface team has created and HoloLens and those guys, and of course on the Xbox group, after seeing the things that they make, and we actually saw how they make it, and we can just talk about how we did get a brief tour of the Surface where they make them, and they basically engineer these devices and stuff like that. The thing is, when you see that and you talk to the people who work on these products, I just know that when they go, okay, it's time for us to do some kind of mobile, true mobile device. Like, I just know it's going to be awesome because that's all they do now is awesome. Like, for all the revisions of like Surface Pro since 3, it's been like, they've been doing really making all the right moves and none of the wrong moves. I'm excited about whatever Surface Book 2, which we don't even expect, I think, until maybe fall, because they take their times on these things. And that's both good and bad. You want it right now, right? But at the same time, it's like, no, the team is like, no, we're going to just get this kind of right. And I think whenever they decide to get back into the mobile space again, it's going to be the Surface team that will lead it, of course. And that device should be pretty killer. But until that day, yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a tough road ahead.
Yeah, and I've said this like loads of times now, but the future of Windows isn't tethered to a wall. It is mobile, whether it be a phone or something that plugs into your eyeball, whatever. It's it will be around for the foreseeable future on mobiles and stuff. But yeah, it's just going to take some time, I think. Moving on to our second to last story, I believe. New builds. Yay. Microsoft released another new build this week, as they do most weeks now. Build 16199. That includes some noteworthy changes, which is actually pretty exciting. So first and foremost, my people got a lot of updates. You can now do things like drag and drop files over the little pinned icons and stuff. You could also send what Microsoft are no longer calling shoulder taps. I don't know why. They did originally call them shoulder taps, but now they don't call them that anymore. So I'm just going to call them interactive notification pop-ups. That basically you send like an emoji or like an animation and stuff. It actually pops up on the desktop and does its little animation there, which will get annoying really fast, I'm sure. But
you can disable them. You can
disable them, right? Which is useful because
I think they're adorable looking.
They're very cute, yeah. But that's pretty nice.
It's delightful.
Also, the people, the little pin people you get on the taskbar now have little badges as well, just like apps do on the taskbar normally, which is again pretty nice. And you can now also share directly to people through the Share UI, which is new to the Creators Update, I believe, and now being improved with full Creators Update. There's also some improvements to the settings app. So the About area in settings now has some Windows Defender stats, including how your PC is being monitored and stuff. I guess that's nice. I mean, I didn't really need that there, but it's there now. Also, a slight in the sidebars on the settings app, there's now video tutorials for certain things, which I think might be helpful because I know the Tips app has all of the videos in there, but it will be cool to have some areas in settings have specific videos for that setting, which may help users when messing about in the settings app. Another thing, and this also kind of ties back into the whole Microsoft's new mobile strategy, you can now get incoming call notifications for Android devices. If you use the Cortana app, Windows will now send, your Android phone will now send a notification to your PC that's signed in with the same Microsoft account and will give you a pop-up that gives you the option to text back or decline the call, which is great. But eventually they will also add the ability to actually take the call on your PC. That would be pretty cool.
That's really interesting. Although I do worry about how that technology would work after what has been the hugest disappointment in modern technology, Miracast. Just like followed by closely, I would say Bluetooth 4.0. So yeah, this idea of like streaming media, I think it's super impressive. I think the call notification stuff is just kind of funny because I usually like have my phones right next to my PC. So it's like, I found like, it's like, hey, that thing that's ringing and making all that racket right next to you, it's your phone. Here's a notification to tell you that. I just think it's a lot funny. But the ability to obviously send a text back or decline it is, I guess it's a little convenient. I think. I don't know. Maybe.
There was also a new build for mobile, build 15215, which is still from the Feature 2 branch. So it includes absolutely nothing worthy of note apart from some fixes. So, if you were having call audio issues... hey,
at least you're fixing it.
Yeah, that's very true. I'm actually running the fast ring on my Lumia just because they're fixing stuff there now. And I thought, hey, new fixes are worth it.
In fairness, they're still pushing out a lot of the core app updates. Like, I mean...
yeah, the fast ring with the app updates makes it worthwhile entirely.
Yeah.
But yeah, so mobile right now, a lot of it's just through apps and whatever else. So I definitely recommend jumping on the fast ring if you're a mobile user because there's literally there's no risk to it, pretty much. Basically, what the fast ring for mobile right now is the release preview ring for desktop. That's what I'm looking at it as. There's nothing going on in there that could damage anything, apart from the WeChat app doesn't work sometimes. If you use that, don't do it. Yeah, but everybody else should be fine.
Speaking of, let's quickly address this, which is, if you're running a PC, should you go to Fast Ring? What is the stability story for this week? For me, I'm running it on Surface Book. And I think, also Surface Studio, which I'm on right now. I can't say I'm really having any major show-stopping bugs yet. So, Zach, what about you?
I'm running the build on the machine I'm streaming from right now. I'd say, yeah, it's pretty good. Go for it. There are some known issues. Obviously, before you do any upgrades, don't just take our word for it. Check the Windows blog for the known issues. And if there's anything that affects you specifically, then don't upgrade, of course. But everything that I'm reading here doesn't really affect me. Here's an example. If you're a gamer, games such as Civilization 6 may fail to launch on this build. If you play that, then you're screwed. But if you're a developer for Windows Mixed Reality, this build doesn't work for you because Windows Mixed Reality is broken in this build. So there's stuff like that. But if you're just a normal sort of user who doesn't need to worry about that, there's actually quite a big one, and this one I should make note of. If you will be unable to type in your password to log into any UWP apps such as Netflix, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or Messenger apps. If you're already logged into your apps, you should be okay updating to this build, but don't log out. So basically, the password fields for UWP apps don't work right now in this build. Don't update to this build if you need to log into UWP stuff. Otherwise, again, you should be fine.
Sounds good. And finally, tell us about this Control Center build.
So, along with the announcement of build 16.199, Microsoft had a nice sort of GIF showcasing the new sort of shoulder taps, which they don't call shoulder taps now. But in that GIF, it was not from the same branch that the Insider Preview build is from. The Insider Preview builds are from a branch called RS_pre-release. This GIF was from an internal core shell build, whatever. But it also had an interesting thing in the system tray. It had a little settings cog, which a lot of people noticed and tweeted me about. And I actually knew about this settings cog for a little bit while now. Basically, Microsoft had sort of toying with building a control center into Windows 10. Now, what this does is take all of the action center stuff, the quick actions out of the notification center, and puts them in their own separate area. A lot of people have looked at this and gone, but what's the point? Sure, if you prefer having everything in one area, then yeah, this is a bad idea. But for those of you who don't actually use the notification center, which I know a lot of desktop people don't, this makes sense. No longer do you get notifications and all that. It's just a nice little convenient pop-up that doesn't take up the full height of the screen, that you can just customize to your liking. It has a brightness slider in it. It also has the quick actions as normal, then a bunch of other quick shortcuts to settings. And it can be adjusted to your liking. You can rearrange things. You can add and remove quick actions and shortcuts to it. And it makes sense if you're a mouse user. Now, I would imagine if you're a tablet user or phone user, obviously this wouldn't make sense on phone. I don't even think it's coming. But on tablet, if you go into tablet mode, I would suspect that the control center goes away and everything goes back into the notification center. That would just make the most sense. But when you're in desktop mode, using a mouse to access the control center kind of makes more sense. And honestly, that it looks fine. It's still in development, obviously, so its UI could change and stuff. But it is an interesting idea that they've been toying with for some time now. I honestly thought the feature was dead because I heard about this a while ago, but then I stopped hearing about it. But then I saw it in that GIF that was released by Microsoft earlier in the week. So I thought, it must be still alive. But hey, there you go.
I like the changes because, personally, I do use the notification center, but I hate how I have to share space with the quick actions. It just seems a little like, do I keep the quick actions expanded or not? I don't know. It's a lot of kind of weird choices. I kind of like the idea of just notification center just being, or action center just being notifications where they just stream in and you can ignore it. It's also, and I'm noticing at least on this latest build of FastSpring, it seems to be working better on Surface Studio. On Surface Studio, there would be sometimes lags. You'd click the action center and it would just be this 2-second delay before it popped out. And I think because that's just the hard drive and, just issues. So this may be also a performance thing where if you really want to get to a feature quickly, you can do that now without the lag of the notification stuff.
Yeah, no, and the control center stuff, I think, again, like I said, it makes sense on desktop. It wouldn't make much sense on a tablet. And again, like I said, I'm sure Microsoft will work around that. So when you're in tablet mode, it all goes back into the action center and so on and so forth. But yeah, some new features in the works that haven't been announced. And of course, as with all unannounced features, Microsoft can decide to pull the plug or just never release it as they please. So keep that in mind when reading about the control center stuff, which you can do so on Windows Central. There is also a screenshot of it in the article that I wrote. So if you want to have a look at it, go to Windows Central and look at the article.
That sounds good. Look at that. 1 hour and 4 minutes, almost 1 hour and 5 minutes, just as I predicted. But there you go. So that is a wrap for this week. Now we'll stay around to do some questions with the audience just for the live broadcast. Otherwise, you can rewatch this all weekend on Beam, our Beam Pro channel, beampro.windows/Windows Central. The replay will be on there, and it'll be the edited version will be posted on Monday. We are also expecting to record a live podcast on Tuesday, May 23rd, following the Microsoft Shanghai event, and discuss what was happening there, because we could offer some really interesting insight onto the news of the day. And I think you guys will definitely want to tune in for that. So thank you as always for listening. Remember to subscribe to us on Beam as well as the YouTube channel. And join us for Thursdays for the Microsoft Gaming Libations, where me, Zach, and Jez Corden, our games editor, get to play some games and have some fun. I missed this week. I heard you guys had fun.
You missed such a fun week. Me and Jez had such a blast playing Forza Horizon 3.
I'm sure you guys did.
It was
I want to
so
play
great. It was so great.
Well, I want to play the Hot Wheels part, not that.
Yeah, the Hot Wheels, that's what we did. We played it. It was so fun, honestly.
See? So you might have to do that again. But yes, so that's on Thursdays. Thank you as always, guys. Take care.